This is live coverage on C-SPAN 2. On C-SPAN.
Where the checks actually went.
Chair. Gavel for it. Do you need a gavel for it? Do you need a gavel? The House and the Committee of the Whole House of the State of the Union for further consideration of H.R. 2354, which the clerk will report by title.
Bill making appropriations for energy and water development and related agencies for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2012, and for other purposes.
When the Committee of the Whole rose earlier today, the bill had been read through page 23, line 10. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on those amendments printed in the Congressional Record on which further proceedings were postponed. In the following order: an amendment from Mr. Tierney of Massachusetts, an amendment from Mr. Graves of Missouri, an amendment from Mr. Scalise of Louisiana, an amendment from Mr. Woodall of Georgia, an amendment from Mr. McClintock of California. The Chair will reduce to 2 minutes the time for any electronic vote after the first vote in this series. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on an amendment offered by the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Tierney, on which further proceedings were postponed, and which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Tierney of Massachusetts.
Recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. The members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.
This is the first in a series of 5 votes this evening. As you heard, it's a 15-minute vote. And while we watch this vote, here's a Capitol Hill reporter talking about the debt and deficit reduction talks.
Jake Sherman, a reporter with Politico, joins us by phone to talk about the status of the debt ceiling and the spending cut negotiations. There's been a lot of activity today between President Obama and congressional leaders. Have they made any headway?
Much to do about nothing, I guess. They have not made a ton of headway. I mean, it seems like they're heading for a more narrow deal, a deal that only includes cuts. But President Obama is still pushing for that big deal that would cut $4 trillion. Although Speaker Boehner and Eric Cantor, the two top Republicans in the House, seem to be backing away from that very quickly and have completely dismissed it by and large. So we are getting closer to the default date, I guess you could say, and no deal is really in sight, although they have this Biden group framework, which who knows what that means, and the outlines of it aren't really public. But in the next couple of days, it seems like they're going to be working a lot off of that.
Well, as you mentioned, President Obama said he will not sign a short-term measure to raise the debt ceiling. What happens if neither side can reach an agreement there?
Well, I think he's saying that right now, and I wouldn't pretend to know the president's thinking, but I think he would sign a short-term deal instead of defaulting. Now, Republicans in the House have said they don't want a short-term deal either, so they're kind of on the same page as the president on this. But a short-term deal, according to people on Wall Street and here in Washington, would only add more uncertainty and show that Washington just can't get together to do anything. Yeah, it's a difficult negotiation. It's a difficult situation. But President Obama said today, as you indicated, this is America. We don't do things in such short-term measures. But assuming he would do that rather than a default.
Does the fact that the president and Speaker Boehner held different separate press conferences today indicate how the negotiations are going, good or bad?
You know, I think they're all trying to grab hold of the message war, and which, as we know, is half the battle in Washington. Majority Leader Eric Cantor had his weekly availability with Capitol Hill reporters today. You're going to have Boehner and the president. You know, they all want those clips on the nightly news. They all want to be out there in front of the people, because it seems like, you know, the American people are just catching up with what this is, because we've never really had these fights in Washington over the debt ceiling. They've usually been attached to other bills, and this is they're starting to figure out that this is going to be a problem. And Boehner, who usually does one press availability a week, as you said, did one today, and will probably do more as the week goes on to kind of try to grab hold of this.
You mentioned Eric Cantor holding his briefing with reporters. He said that raising taxes in a recession is a non-starter. for House Republicans. If that's the case, where is the room for compromise?
That's a question that's coming up more and more often. Is that where are Republicans willing to concede, and where are the concessions from the right? And what Cantor is saying is that just voting on this is a concession, but the kind of funny thing about that is he's saying this has to be raised, the debt ceiling must be raised, and everyone realizes it. So it's tough to make the argument if you're saying that it's a necessity, that it's also a concession. So they're not saying that there's any revenues. They're saying even if you want to close some of these loopholes for oil and gas companies and corporate jets, that they need to be offset by tax cuts elsewhere. So that argument, that's playing out more and more frequently as Democrats try to get across the message that you have a Republican Party that's just unwilling to give on anything.
You mentioned there's been a lot of back and forth. What happened to the idea of getting that larger, broader agreement, like the $4 trillion plan of spending cuts and raising revenue?
Well, what Boehner is trying to say now, the Speaker is saying that it just didn't have were not going to agree to tax increases, and the president wanted to do entitlement reform and reform the tax code, but he wanted to hike taxes, and that was a non-starter for Republicans. And any deal is going to have a tough time getting through the House, no matter if it's just cuts, because there are those like Michelle Bachmann who say they're just not voting for this thing; it's just not happening. And there are others who it's just not going to be enough for, and they want to get to yes, but they're not going to get to yes. And then there are Democrats who don't want entitlements as part of this thing. So a grand compromise would have even more to shoot at, to use a not great term, but that's what it is. I mean, there would be more to criticize in a deal, and the less, I guess, the thinking would be the less you have, the more basic it is, the easier it will be to get 218 to move it to the Senate.
How much time do they really have to reach agreement and pass some kind of legislation before the August 2nd default deadline?
I mean, really not many. I mean, it's already Monday evening, so we have this week, the week after, and the week after that. That's kind of, not many days. It's 14 legislative days to get this deal done. Obama said he wanted one done by the 22nd, which is only, a week away. So, I'm not, it doesn't look at this point, it doesn't look, it looks like we're going to be in for a long July and a very strenuous July. But listen, they have these Biden blueprints on the table, and if they could kind of coalesce around those, that might provide some hope in getting a deal done soon.
Jake Sherman, congressional reporter for Politico. Thanks for the insight.
Thanks for having me.
House members are voting on the first of 5 amendments to the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill. While this vote continues, President Obama held a news conference earlier today where he spoke and took questions from reporters about the debt and deficit reduction talks. Here's a portion of that.
Good morning, everybody. I want to give a quick update on what's happening with the debt negotiations, provide my perspective, and then I'm going to take a few questions. As all of you know, I met with congressional leaders yesterday. We're going to be meeting again today, and we're going to meet every single day until we get this thing resolved. The good news is that all the leaders continue to believe, rightly, that it is not acceptable for us not to raise the debt ceiling and to allow the U.S. government to default. We cannot threaten the United States full faith and credit for the first time in our history. We still have a lot of work to do, though, to get this problem solved. And so let me just make a couple of points. First of all of us agree that we should use this opportunity to do something meaningful on debt and deficits. And the reports that have been out there have been largely accurate, that Speaker Boehner and myself had been in a series of conversations about doing the biggest deal possible so that we could actually resolve our debt and our deficit challenge for a long stretch of time. And I want to say I appreciate Speaker Boehner's good faith efforts on that front. What I emphasized to the broader group of congressional leaders yesterday is now is the time to deal with these issues. If not now, when? I've been hearing from my Republican friends for quite some time that it is a moral imperative for us to tackle our debt and our deficits in a serious way. I've been hearing from them that this is one of the things that's creating uncertainty and holding back investment on the part of the business community. And so what I've said to them is, let's go. And it is possible for us to construct a package that would be balanced, would share sacrifice, would involve both parties taking on their sacred cows, would involve some meaningful changes to Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid that would preserve the integrity of the programs and keep our sacred trust with our seniors, but make sure those programs were there for not just this generation, but for the next generation. That it is possible for us to bring in revenues in a way that does not impede our current recovery, but is fair and balanced. We have agreed to a series of spending cuts that will make the government leaner, meaner, more effective, more efficient, and give taxpayers a greater bang for their buck. That includes defense spending, that includes health spending, it includes some programs that I like very much, and we'd be nice to have, but that we can't afford right now. And if you look at this overall package, we could achieve a situation in which our deficits were at a manageable level and our debt levels were stabilized, and the economy as a whole, I think, would benefit from that. Moreover, I think it would give the American people enormous confidence that this town can actually do something once in a while, that we can defy the expectations that we're always thinking in terms of short-term politics in the next election, and every once in a while we break out of that and we do what's right for the country. So I continue to push congressional leaders for the largest possible deal. And there's going to be resistance. There is, frankly, resistance on my side to do anything on entitlements. There is strong resistance on the Republican side to do anything on revenues. But if each side takes a maximalist position, if each side wants 100% of what its ideological predispositions are, then we can't get anything done. And I think the American people want to see something done. They feel a sense of urgency, both about the breakdown in our political process and also about the situation in our economy. So what I've said to the leaders is, bring back to me some ideas that you think can get the necessary number of votes in the House and in the Senate. I'm happy to consider all options, all alternatives that they're looking at. The things that I will not consider are a 30-day or a 60-day or a 90-day or a 180-day temporary stopgap resolution to this problem. This is the United States of America, and we don't manage our affairs in 3-month increments. We don't risk U.S. default on our obligations because we can't put politics aside. So I've been very clear to them. We're going to resolve this, and we're going to resolve this for a reasonable period of time, and we're going to resolve it in a serious way. And my hope is that as a consequence of negotiations that take place today, tomorrow, the next day, and through next weekend if necessary, that we're going to come up with a plan that solves our short-term debt and deficit problems, avoids default, stabilizes the economy, and proves to the American people that we can actually get things done in this country and in this town. All right, with that, I'm going to take some questions, starting with Ben Phillip.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Two quick topics. Given that you're running out of time, can you explain what is your plan for where these talks go if Republicans continue to oppose any tax increases, as they've adamantly said that they will? And secondly, on your point about no short-term stopgap measure, if it came down to that and Congress went that route, I know you're opposed to it, but would you veto it?
I will not sign a 30-day or a 60-day or a 90-day extension. That is just not an acceptable approach. And if we think it's going to be hard, if we think it's hard now, imagine how these guys are going to be thinking 6 months from now in the middle of election season when they're all up. It's not going to get easier, it's going to get harder. So we might as well do it now. Pull off the Band-Aid. Eat our peas. Now's the time to do it. If not now, when? We keep on talking about this stuff, and we have these high-minded pronouncements about how we've got to get control of the deficit and how we owe it to our children and our grandchildren. Well, let's step up. Let's do it. I'm prepared to do it. I'm prepared to take on significant heat from my party to get something done. And I expect the other side should be willing to do the same thing if they mean what they say, that this is important. And let me just then comment on this whole issue of tax increases, because there's been a lot of information floating around there. I want to be crystal clear. Nobody has talked about increasing taxes now. Nobody has talked about increasing taxes next year. What we have talked about is that starting in 2013, that we have gotten rid of some of these egregious loopholes that are benefiting corporate jet owners or oil companies at a time where they're making billions of dollars of profits. What we have said is, as part of a broader package, we should have revenues, and the best place to get those revenues are from folks like me who have been extraordinarily fortunate, and that millionaires and billionaires can afford to pay a little bit more, going back to the Bush tax rates. And what I've also said to the Republicans is, if you don't like that formulation, then I'm happy to work with you on tax reform that could potentially lower everybody's rates and broaden the base, as long as that package was sufficiently progressive so that we weren't balancing the budget on the backs of middle-class families and working-class families. And we weren't letting hedge fund managers or authors of best-selling books off the hook. That is a reasonable proposition. So when you hear folks saying, well, the president shouldn't want massive job-killing tax increases when the economy's this weak, nobody's looking to raise taxes right now. We're talking about potentially 2013 and the out years. In fact, the only proposition that's out there about raising taxes next year would be if we don't renew the payroll tax cut that we passed in December, and I'm in favor of renewing it for next year as well. But there have been some Republicans who said we may not renew it. And if we don't renew that, then the $1,000 that's been going to a typical American family this year as a consequence of the tax cut that I worked with the Republicans and passed in December, that lapses. That could weaken the economy. So I have bent over backwards to work with the Republicans to try to come up with a formulation that doesn't require them to vote sometime the next month to increase taxes. What I've said is, to identify a revenue package that makes sense, that is commensurate with the sacrifices we're asking other people to make, and then I'm happy to work with you to figure out how else we might do it.
Do you see any path to a deal if they don't budge on taxes?
I do not see a path to a deal if they don't budge, period. I mean, if the basic proposition is it's my way or the highway, then we're probably not going to get something done because we've got divided government. We've got Democrats controlling the Senate. We probably are going to need Democratic votes in the House for any package that could possibly pass. And so if, in fact, Mitch McConnell and John Boehner are sincere, and I believe they are, that they don't want to see the U.S. government default, then they're going to have to compromise just like Democrats are going to have to compromise, just like I have shown myself willing to compromise. Chip Reed.
Thank you, Mr. President. You said that everybody in the room is willing to do what they have to do, wants to get something done by August 2nd. But isn't the problem the people who aren't in the room, and in particular Republican presidential candidates, Republican Tea Partiers on the Hill, and the American public? The latest CBS News poll showed that only 24% of Americans said you should raise the debt limit to avoid an economic catastrophe. There are still 69% who oppose raising the debt limit. So isn't the problem that you and others have failed to convince the American people that we have a crisis here, and how are you going to change that?
Let me distinguish between professional politicians and the public at large. The public is not paying close attention to the ins and outs of how a Treasury auction goes. They shouldn't. They're worrying about their family, they're worrying about their jobs, they're worrying about their neighborhood. They've got a lot of other things on their plate. We're paid to worry about it. I think, depending on how you phrase the question, if you said to the American people, is it a good idea for the United States not to pay its bills and potentially create another recession that could throw millions of more people out of work, I feel pretty confident I can get a majority on my side on that one. And that's the fact. If we don't raise the debt ceiling and we see a crisis of confidence in the markets and suddenly interest rates are going up significantly, and everybody is paying higher interest rates on their car loans, on their mortgages, on their credit cards, and that's sucking up a whole bunch of additional money out of the pockets of the American people, I promise you, they won't like that. Now, I will say that some of the professional politicians know better. And for them to say that we shouldn't be raising the debt ceiling is irresponsible. They know better. And this is not something that I am making up. This is not something that Tim Geithner's making up. We're not out here trying to use this as a means of doing all these really tough political things. I'd rather be talking about stuff that everybody welcomes, like new programs or the NFL season getting resolved. Or unfortunately, this is what's on our plate. It's before us right now, and we've got to deal with it. So what you're right about, I think, is that the leaders in the room here, at a certain point, have to step up and do the right thing, regardless of the voices in our respective parties that are trying to undermine that effort. I have a stake in John Boehner successfully persuading his caucus that this is the right thing to do, just like he has a stake in seeing me successfully persuading the Democratic Party that we should take on these problems that we've been talking about for too long but haven't been doing anything about.
Do you think he'll come back to the $4 trillion deal?
I think Speaker Boehner has been very sincere about trying to do something big. I think he'd like to do something big. His politics within his caucus are very difficult. You're right. And this is part of the problem with a political process where folks are rewarded for saying irresponsible things to win elections or obtain short-term political gain when we actually are in a position to try to do something hard. We haven't always laid the groundwork for it. And I think that it's going to take some work on his side, but look, it's also going to take some work on our side in order to get this thing done. I mean, the vast majority of Democrats on Capitol Hill would prefer not to have to do anything on entitlements, would prefer, frankly, not to have to do anything on some of these debt and deficit problems. And I'm sympathetic to their concerns because they're looking after folks who are already hurting and already vulnerable, and there are a lot of families out there and seniors who are dependent on some of these programs. And what I've tried to explain to them is, number one, if you look at the numbers, then Medicare in particular will run out of money, and we will not be able to sustain that program, no matter how much taxes go up. I mean, it's not an option for us to just sit by and do nothing. And if you're a progressive who cares about the integrity of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and believes that it is part of what makes our country great that we look after our seniors and we look after the most vulnerable, then we have an obligation to make sure that we make those changes that are required to make it sustainable over the long term. And if you're a progressive that cares about investments in Head Start and student loan programs and medical research and infrastructure, we're not going to be able to make progress on those areas if we haven't gotten our fiscal house in order. You know, the argument I'm making to my party is the values we care about, making sure that everybody in this country has a shot at the American dream, and everybody's out there with the opportunity to succeed if they work hard and live a responsible life.
On this vote, the yeas are 162, the nays are 246. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business on the request for a recorded vote on an amendment offered by the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Graves, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Graves of Missouri.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, the recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
This is now the second in a series of 5 votes on amendments to the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill. This is the only series of votes expected for today. After votes, members resume amendment debate on energy and water appropriations. This is live House coverage on C-SPAN.
On this vote, the yeas are 216, the nays are 190. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business of the request for a recorded vote on an amendment offered by the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise, on which further proceedings were postponed, in which the noes prevailed by voice votes. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Scalise of Louisiana.
Vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, the recorded vote is ordered. Members are to record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
Members are voting now on the Scalise amendment to the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill. This is the third in a series of 5 votes today. It's a 2-minute vote.
On this vote, the yeas are 241, the nays are 168. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business on the request for a recorded vote on an amendment offered by the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Woodall, in which further proceedings were postponed, in which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Woodall of Georgia.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
This is a vote on the Woodall amendment to the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill. After this vote, there's one more left in the series. This is live House coverage on C-SPAN.
The yeas are 218, the nays are 191. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is at the request for a recorded vote on amendment offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock, on which further proceedings were postponed and which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. McClintock of California.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
This vote on the McClintock amendment to the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill is the last in the series. After this, members resume amendment debate.
On this vote, the yeas are 96, the nays are 313. The amendment is not adopted. Adam shows up, I'll swap back with him. I'll swap with him. I'm here.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I thought it was after. One person actually doesn't actually have an appendix number. So, you're not a
Ow.
Yes.
The House will be in order. For what reason does the gentleman from Colorado rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk, and the House is not in order.
The committee will be in order. The committee will be in order. The committee will be in order. The clerk will designate the amendment.
And then amendment number 5, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Lamborn of Colorado.
The committee will be in order. Gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My constituents in Colorado, like all Americans...
Mr. Chairman, the House is not in order.
The gentleman is correct. The gentleman will suspend. The committee will be in order. The gentleman deserves to be heard. The gentleman may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also thank the gentleman from New Jersey. My constituents in Colorado, like all Americans, are demanding that Congress cut spending. We must look for every opportunity, large and small, to cut wasteful government programs. This amendment does just that. The Weatherization Assistance Program, otherwise known as Cash for Caulkers, and part of the failed stimulus package, has been plagued by bureaucratic mismanagement. This $5 billion program was supposed to create jobs, but we all know that didn't work out so well. In fact, with unemployment ticking up for 2 months in a row, we must reverse course and cut all unspent stimulus dollars. In the stimulus, $5 billion was injected into Cash for Caulkers through the Department of Energy in an attempt to help lower the cost of energy and increase efficiency for people who qualify. The goal was to make 593,000 homes more energy efficient by March 2012. This program, however, has been marked by mismanagement, fraud, waste, and abuse. Most notably is the case of Delaware, where federal auditors found mismanagement issues and potential fraudulent activities. Reportedly, subsequent repairs and other inspections will cost the state a sizable amount of their remaining funds. Issues have arisen in other states as well. When large sums of money are spent too quickly, the opportunities for waste and abuse are rampant. The Obama administration, in its haste to create government jobs, failed to thoughtfully and prudently assess how money was spent. In these tough fiscal times, we must have accountability for every dollar spent by the federal government. States have until March of 2012 to use Cash for Caulkers funds or risk having them returned to the Treasury. I am concerned that this could leave a large slush fund of $1.5 billion in the hands of federal bureaucrats. They could spend that money with very little congressional oversight. My amendment is simple. It will prevent the Secretary of Energy from reallocating funds remaining from the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act from one state to another. This will leave up to $1.5 billion that can be returned to the Treasury next March, thus reducing our massive deficit. I urge support for this amendment. And, Mr. Chairman, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman may not reserve his time. Does the gentleman yield back?
Move to strike. You yield back?
Does the gentleman from Colorado yield back?
I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
To strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, this amendment strikes language in the bill that allows the Secretary of Energy to redirect unspent stimulus funds from one state to another. What they're really saying is this: $1.5 billion is going to be taken from the states that decided not to use the money to give to states that not only have spent their allocations but want to spend even more. If Aesop was writing this tale, I think it would include an ant and a grasshopper. The principle stinks, and so does the program. These funds are ostensibly to finance weatherization and building design programs to increase energy efficiency. But the potential savings, if anywhere near as great as the administration claims, should be more than enough motivation for individuals to pursue this activity on their own without a government giveaway. After all, why should taxpayers pay to develop and subsidize building materials and technologies to be sold in the private sector to private consumers? In all matters of energy and energy conservation, we've got to get back to a simple doctrine that the beneficiary should pay. If a product saves consumers money, in this case through energy savings, that's a benefit, and it is incorporated into the price structure of that product. This elegant and simple process allows consumers to decide for themselves if the added energy savings are worth the added financial cost. If the answer is yes, the world will beat a path to the door of those who manufacture and sell those products. And if the answer is no, taxpayers shouldn't be subsidizing it. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
And I rise to oppose the amendment. The weatherization program was provided $5 billion by the stimulus bill in 2009. The program has been slow to act, and approximately $1.4 billion will be unspent and available for use in the fiscal year 2012. Some states have spent all of their stimulus money, while others will have plenty left for fiscal year 2012. But the Department of Energy, by law, must spread any new funding evenly across all states. The bill cuts this program by $141 million below the President's request. The language in the underlying bill gives the Secretary of Energy the flexibility to use limited appropriations provided in fiscal year 2012 to supplement states that have no stimulus funding. The bill does not allow, I'd like to add that emphasis, the bill does not allow the Secretary to reallocate stimulus funds. All it does is to allow the Secretary some flexibility in where he allocates it. There's $33 million left in the bill. Let me say, we can't afford in the Department of Energy with this program or any other program to have business as usual in terms of weatherizations. And I would agree with the gentleman from Colorado that in many cases the money hasn't been spent, and in some cases there have been questions as to how well it's been spent. This waiver in our bill provides a solution allowing all states to continue this program under a tight federal budget and with direct oversight of our committee. The amendment that is suggested by the gentleman from Colorado would undo the solution by striking language providing this flexibility, causing job losses, and program stoppages in many states where, in fact, in those states, these funds are obligated. So, therefore, I oppose the amendment and urge other members to do so as well, and yield back.
The gentleman yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from Indiana rise?
Chairman, I would move to strike the last word and rise in opposition to the amendment as well.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I would point out to my colleagues that while the pending legislation is $141 million below fiscal year 11 levels, the fact is we do have approximately $1.5 billion that essentially has been forwarded to the states. And the chairman just mentioned the issue of jobs. Those monies are available as they are allocated and distributed for weatherization programs to put people to work. We have had complaints in this chamber over the last week about the last unemployment report. These monies have already been budgeted. These monies have been obligated to the states, and these monies can put people to work doing useful things, such as helping those who need to weatherize their house, reduce their utility bills so that they can have enough money to buy gasoline and put it in their cars, as well as to begin to reduce the use of energy in this country. These are very necessary monies to create jobs, to help those in need, and to reduce our energy dependence. And I strongly oppose the gentleman's amendment, and I would yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back. Questions on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Colorado. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Gentleman from Colorado.
I ask for the ayes and noes. Recorded vote.
The gentleman asks for a recorded vote. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Colorado will be postponed. This is the gentleman from Virginia Rice.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk and ask for its consideration.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Connolly of Virginia, page 23, line 4. After the dollar amount, insert increased by $46 million. Page 24, line 18. After the dollar amount, insert reduced by $99 million.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the Chair. Mr. Chairman, the fiscal 2012 Energy and Water Appropriations Act is an assault on any rational or scientific basis for public policy. It would decimate American manufacturing, impoverish American consumers, and allow polluters to sully our water with impunity. At a time when the American economy is stuck in neutral, while China and Germany are accelerating the production of clean energy and advanced vehicles, this bill would take America back to the 19th century standard of unbridled industrial predation without public oversight or regulation. Mr. Peters of Michigan and I have drafted a simple amendment to fix one among many problems in this bill. Mr. Peters has been a leader of efforts to restore our auto industry, and I appreciate his co-sponsorship of this amendment. It would simply restore some of the funding cut from the Vehicles Technologies Program with a funding offset provided by eliminating an increase in corporate welfare for the fossil fuel industry. This amendment would maintain the same level of funding as were provided in this fiscal year's Energy and Water Appropriation Bill. The Vehicle Technologies Program is a critical part of our effort to revive American manufacturing in the automobile industry. It's a job generator. 5 years ago, our auto industry was on its deathbed, with two major manufacturers facing bankruptcy. Fortunately, President Obama intervened and provided temporary assistance both to General Motors and Chrysler, most of which has already been repaid. Today, those manufacturers are growing again with positive domestic economic benefits for auto dealers and parts suppliers all across America. Unfortunately, this Energy and Water Appropriations Bill would reverse this progress by gutting important vehicle research funding. The Vehicle Technologies Program is a success story in boosting domestic manufacturing of cleaner cars that save consumers money at the pump. It is reducing the cost of advanced lithium-ion batteries, which are in all hybrid vehicles on the road in America. This program has helped deploy 48 battery manufacturing projects all across the United States with a goal of reducing hybrid vehicle engine costs by 35%. Hybrid vehicles are an important part of our domestic manufacturing base and provide direct quality of life benefits in suburban regions with high levels of smog pollution, such as here in the nation's capital. The Advanced Vehicle Technologies Program also is helping to deploy electric vehicles, including the new Chevy Volt. Finally, Mr. Chairman, this program has accelerated deployment of hybrid electric diesel buses, improving transit service and air quality in communities throughout the country like my own in Fairfax County, Virginia. We cannot allow a hemorrhaging of technology and manufacturing jobs to foreign competition while unemployment grows in America. The Republicans seem to believe that corporate welfare for oil companies will help the economy. But we tried that during the previous administration, and it did not work. We need to refocus on building the technologies of the future right here in America. And the Vehicle Technologies Program is a part of that effort. I ask for favorable consideration of this amendment, and I yield back.
Yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to oppose the amendment.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
The gentleman from Virginia's amendment would increase funding for the energy efficiency and renewable energy and reduce funding for fossil energy research and development. This would result in an increase in a program that already receives sufficient funds and hamper efforts to further technologies that produce most of our electricity. Let's be frank. Fossil fuels such as coal and natural gas generate 70% of our nation's electricity, and we will use these valuable energy sources for many generations. We must ensure that we use those resources, of course, as efficiently and cleanly as possible. Further, the amendment increases funding for energy efficiency and renewable energy, a program that has seen record increases since 2007 and still has nearly, if you can believe it, $9 billion of unspent stimulus funds from 2009. There is a proper role for the core energy and efficiency and renewable programs, and the bill preserves funding for those activities while cutting out activities which are redundant with the private sector or that intervene improperly in market innovation. But the amendment would also add back unnecessary funding for administration proposals that are poorly planned and lack justification. That in and of itself is bad enough, and I oppose the amendment and urge others to do so as well, and yield back.
Gentleman yields back.